We're going to switch gears and mix it up a little bit. Great fun. Distinguished panel. We'll bring in the co-anchors. This is unbelievable. The co-anchors of America Reports on Fox News. Sandra Smith, raise your hand.
Yes.
And John Roberts. And if that weren't good enough,
Here.
Hey, wait
Riggs.
a second. We live in Washington where you only raise your hand.
I know you go like that. And if all that weren't enough, Taylor Riggs, co-host of the Big Money
Should
Show.
I raise my hand too? So I get to hear.
Do you swear to?
We have little names. All right, now, I'll start with we're going to get to the economic stuff and spending and jobs in just a second. But I want to walk through. Here's some sound from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in his rather shaky press conference this morning. Take a listen.
We're not at war with Iran. And yeah, the Houthis continue to do some things that are very irresponsible and illegal. The president will not tolerate attacks on American troops, and neither will I.
All right, there you see it here. John, I want to begin with you covering this beat. Look, I think we are at war with Iran, point number one. And point number two, this is day 5 without a response to what happened. It killed 3 American service members. I think we're dishonoring them. We're dishonoring the whole country. Over 3 dozen were wounded. We lost 2 Navy SEALs before that. And still, they've done nothing.
It is rather surprising. And every day that goes by, I think the Iranians are looking back and saying that this is an administration that can't find its way forward. Now, you'll remember that back in 2020, when Qasem Soleimani was taken out, there was a lag time between the time that American contractor was killed and the time that Soleimani was taken out. But I think that's because they were waiting for the precise moment that they could hit Iran as hard as possible. Every indication that we're getting from this administration, particularly with that press conference today, was that they're not planning on hitting Iran in any way, shape, or form.
Nothing. No oil fields, command and control, training centers. They're going to hit these militia-backed outposts, but they're not going to hit Iran. And I think
there's
that's
some thought about
mistake.
what they might do with the Iranian ship that's in the Red Sea that's giving the targeting information to the Houthis. But that would be pulling a very big trigger if they tried to take that out. And I think a trigger that Biden doesn't want to pull.
And one last point. At no point have we heard anything that they are going to restore the sanctions, the Trump sanctions that were sanctioned by Congress at the same time.
And that's something you could do
that's
something you could do in a matter of hours,
exactly.
And yet still nothing.
It's an economic response, right? And nothing. They don't do it.
I think the American people are hoping that they're taking their time because this is going to be big. But I think that might be wishful thinking.
All right. Wishful thinking. Sandra Smith, so you're writing, texting me early in the morning with all kinds of bad news, you know. I was kind of enjoying...
Who else am I going to talk to about the economy?
My mea culpa, I was wrong about the slowdown in the recession. So was the entire...
I don't think you were wrong.
...forecasting fraternity. Well, the Fed, everyone was wrong. Okay, but you mentioned all these job layoffs. Tomorrow's the jobs number. Taylor is going to accurately predict the jobs number before we're finished.
Okay.
But it is interesting.
Get my stock trading app out.
The month of January alone, this is from Challenger Gray, total jobs lost, 82,307. Finance jobs lost, 23,000. Tech jobs lost, 15,000. Food-producing jobs lost. And in general, other surveys have shown the same thing. In fact, one survey shows in tech overall last year lost 260,000 jobs. Now, I say it, and I think the spirit you sent it to me, unemployment remains low, and most of these monthly job gains are pretty good. So what's up with these layoffs? Why don't they
Well, how else do you
show
fix inflation, right? This is the Fed's goal, right? You have to see a drag on the economy before prices can come down. My guess is that the Federal Reserve is looking more closely at that than inflation. You know, if the labor market takes a significant hit, we could see a significant downturn in the American economy. As far as why is the unemployment, you know, there's a lot of other factors that go into the unemployment number. But as far, it's a trend I notice. So I said Larry Kudlow should probably, I need to ask Larry about this. Every day I wake up, I see headlines about more job cuts. I mean, these are substantial job cuts.
Yeah,
these are in technology, numbers. Finance.
Right.
What was it? Deloitte just announced another this morning. There's a trend happening there.
UPS, 12,000. PayPal 2,500. These are your numbers. Total have lost 40,000 jobs, according to one survey.
I think we should take note. I think we should take note, because how else do you bring prices down without inflicting some serious economic pain on the American people? So let's remind everybody that the reason this has to happen, and the reason the labor market would be seeing this hit, is because the Fed's been tasked with tackling inflation that was caused in the last couple of years. So I think there's a significant thing happening there.
So
that's the technical term.
A significant thing. I like that. So, Taylor, on that subject of government spending, okay, which happens to be inflationary, and I will credit the Wall Street Journal this morning, but it's something Sandra and I talked about. Other people have talked about it. They are still spending their keisters off, okay? And I just want to go back. The misnamed Inflation Reduction Act re-estimated $1.2 trillion by Penn, Wharton, whatever they're called, because there are unlimited subsidies going in there. The so-called CHIPS Act in total, $300 billion. And then just for the hell of it, $1 trillion infrastructure bill. That's just being spent out. So I'm going to read some more numbers, and then you can tee off on it. The deficit in 23, fiscal 23, was a cool $2 trillion. This is with a 3.7% unemployment rate.
And like you said,
$2 trillion. Hang on, 7.5% of GDP.
Yep.
Okay, in the middle of we're growing at 3%, and in 24, fiscal 24, the first quarter, up 20%, $509 billion. They're on track for a $2.4 trillion deficit, which would be about 8.5% of GDP. I mean, this is insanity.
It's insane.
Insanity.
It's insane. And like you said, all this spending is, unfortunately, you guessed it, inflationary, which is why we're in this problem to begin with. Nassim Taleb, author of Black Swan, came out in the last few days and said, we're heading towards another cliff. He really doesn't like the debt and deficits going on. Even Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase coming out in the last few weeks and saying, this is a problem. So when you hear sort of Mr. Doom and Gloom say it, maybe you think, oh, well, that's his position. But when Jamie Dimon is really talking about it, too, you have to perk up your ears and listen. I don't know if it's a 1 year, a 2 year problem, but it could be a 5, 10, 20 year problem if we don't fix our spending problem.
The biggest contributor to GDP in the last year is government. The G, right? C plus I plus G plus net exports. Grew at about 4.5%. Now, it's a small component, so it's not driving, but still, the biggest growth rate of the GDP components was government.
That's the context in which Jamie Dimon made those comments in Davos.
Government, which you have covered, Adrian, for all these years.
I still long for the heady days of the end of the Clinton administration, not necessarily for the president, but for the economy, where we were running a budget surplus.
Yes, that is
and they were
correct.
actually having meetings at the White House
Those were the days.
about retiring the debt.
What to
which
do
at
with
that
it?
point was $5.7 trillion, and what to give in what vehicle to give investors when they weren't selling T-bills anymore. Well, they fixed that problem.
8.5% of GDP budget deficit, and you're growing the economy at 3% with less than 4%, and inflation is supposedly coming down. I don't get it. I admit I was wrong in my forecast about a bad downturn last year, but I don't know. This stuff is not sustainable. We could also talk about how people can't afford to live, and 25% of them are living paycheck to paycheck.
And a small percentage of Americans have enough stash for a rainy day. It's tight.
You should have a business show. You'd be very good at it.
I'll just come on your show, Larry.
Anytime.
Good to be here.
Anytime, Sandra.
It's good to have John Roberts in town, isn't it?
It is a pleasure to see you.
Good to be here in New York City.
I'm coming down there.
I hear all
for the
this news about how things
the
are.
State of the Union, how things really
sketchy.
are, right?
Yeah.
Don't
I
take
wanted
a
to see
walk
it for
alone.
myself.
Taylor Riggs, as always, terrific stuff. Raise your hand. And remember, you can catch Sandra and John on America Reports weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox News. Taylor co-hosts with Brian Brenberg and Jackie DeAngelis at 1 p.m. Eastern on The Big Money Show, right here on Fox Business. All right, I'm Kudlow. This is The Business Show.